Welcome to the 10th seminar in the series of London seminars on the theme of employer engagement in education, run jointly between the Education Employers Task Force and the Centre for Education and Industry at the University of Warwick. We are delighted today that our speaker is Dr. Richard Pettinger from University College London. Richard is a reader in management education at the university and brings to that role a very varied career in business. We're particularly excited about Richard today. He's addressing a question which is very rarely explored in the literature around economics and human resource management, but understanding strategic approaches towards employer engagement in education and how we can sort of conceptualise that. I think that this is exploring some really interesting new territory, and I'm very much looking forward to the debate after the seminar. So please let me introduce Richard Pettinger.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you, everybody. It's great pleasure to be invited along, and thank you very much indeed for that. Just by way of brief introduction and background, as Anthony said, I work up at UCL, just 10 minutes up the road here, where I run an undergraduate and postgraduate program called Information Management for Business. We got involved in that 6 years ago now because however you looked at what business schools were doing, or however you looked at what computer science department was doing, there was kind of disconnection between what they were doing and what employers and companies and organisations actually wanted. And we were asked to get involved in this particular project by an outfit called eSkills UK, who have a remit, among other things, for developing employability and developing the relationships between companies and organisations and universities and colleges of higher education that do this kind of work. One of the other things that they also do, and I should mention this right at the start, is to look at the employability of girls and women in business and management and technology related industries. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that on our programme we have never had a lesser gender balance than 50-50, and for 4 of the 6 years that we've been running the programme we have had more women on the course than men. And so that's, if you like, is the day job. What it has caused me and some of my colleagues to do also is to look much more at this wider question of employability. The second part of my approach to this is that, as I said to Anthony, I'm very, very old. I'm old enough to have had a career before all of this. I worked for an outfit years ago called the Manpower Services Commission, which was, as some people will recognise, which was concerned with the question of employability and the question of employer engagement in the 1970s and 1980s. After I worked for them, I joined a civil engineering company and then worked for Kent County Council for 9 years before coming to work for UCL. With all of those strands, therefore had the opportunity to observe the various initiatives, some led by government, some led by education authorities, some led by quangos, and some by NGOs, and some initiatives by employers' federations, some involvement of trade unions, and all of those sorts of things. All of those initiatives have taken place at a time when actually unemployment has risen and risen and risen. The first general election that I voted in was the election that got rid of Ted Heath in 1974. Part of the reason for that was that he had got bad press and you know, who runs England, the trade unions or him. Part of the reason that he lost the election also was because unemployment rose above the then politically unacceptable figure of 500,000. And that counted everybody, and it counted some part-timers as well. Since then, the unemployment statistics have been nobbled and nobbled and nobbled, and now we have an stated unemployment rate of about 2.6, 2.7 million. Anyone working in a field such as mine and ours, as we do at UCL, therefore, has got to start to consider, well, what are the alternative approaches, or at least where is a part of the problem, or as Anthony said, where should one of the starting points of the conversation be? So what I did to do, or what I started to do, I should say, was to put together some stuff that said, right, well, if you look at the NGOs, if you look at the specific initiatives, if you look at everything else, right, what is the bit, if you like, that is at the hub of what start to appear to be many spokes of the wheel? You say, what do the employers think of this? What do the employers actually think of this? And the answer is, well, we're not quite sure. Certainly we are not quite sure. Nobody ever goes to the employers actually and says, you know, what is our particular perspective? What is our, what is our demand of the of the present situation? So, what this is about, therefore, is presenting a body of experience. It's not a, it's a combination of anecdote and a combination of some research and a combination of some synthesis and a combination of some stuff that has been done through professional bodies, through research activities, and also through the work that we're now doing at UCL. Right. It is about addressing certainly some preconceptions. Right. And I'll introduce it now, but one of the ones that I'll certainly get to is the hiatus that's happened about the sort of the present round of workfare over the recent weeks and months, where it's quite obvious that companies and organisations might be incentivised or might not, but at the first whiff of grape shot, they're off. And will not be involved in government type schemes. So, one of the preconceptions certainly to address is, if you pay employers to do this work through government agencies, they will therefore get involved. Quite obviously, the experience of the last few weeks is that they won't. Given that a bit of government money on the one hand and media coverage on the other, they will take the media coverage at every time. But if that's adverse media coverage, then it's no, this is nothing to do with us. And then finally, at the end, as Anthony said, to begin to propose a conversation that begins to put the employer perspective at the heart of this. Now, I've used the expression strategic human resource management, partly because it rolls off the tongue, and partly because those are the people that ultimately have to be convinced to become involved if employability and employer engagement are genuinely to meet, genuinely to find common ground. It is no use, saying to employers, would you like? The answer is always yes. Oh yeah, we'd love to. What will it take? And the answer is some kind of human resource management or staff management or people management or employment or whatever you like to call it, that has actually got an active involvement and an active engagement, because at the end of the day, if you do not have that, then the best answer that you're going to get is, yeah, we'd love to be involved, yeah, if you give us an incentive we'll do something. And that's the reason for taking this kind of approach. Right, as I said now, it's a synthesis, it's not fully evidenced or anything like that. And I'd certainly take the point, one of my colleagues at the university has always got this thing, how many examples have you got? Well, I've got 3 examples. He says, yeah, the plural of anecdotes is not evidence. And, go along with that entirely. On the other hand, there is this thing that there is quite enough of substance and quite enough of resonance in what we've been doing and what my colleagues around have been doing to say that yes, there is an approach here that has either not been fully pursued, or that employers or their staff management or HR policies or whatever else are not fully engaged, and that therefore it becomes, again, as Anthony said, part of the conversation that we have to have is what do employers, what do companies and organisations genuinely think of this? Where is their genuine position on engagement? Right. So one of if to have any kind of approach to this, then first of all there's got to be some kind of definition of what strategic human resource management or people management is in this particular context, and also demands and interests and requirements of the particular stakeholders that are involved. Again, I refer back to this point about the workfare schemes that have had such bad press over the last few weeks. When I was at the Manpower Services Commission, I was involved on all of the interwork programs that were then. A thing called TOPS, the Training Opportunities Program, the YOPS, the Youth Opportunities Program, which became YTS, the Youth Training Scheme, and the Training Opportunities Program became the Adult Training Scheme, the ATS. And we went through a whole rigmarole in the three and a half years that I was there, finished up with a thing called Work Experience on Employers' Premises, and the acronym for that was WEEP. The attitude that they took then, and the attitude that has become apparent over the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks, has not changed in a generation. It is therefore going around the same circuit, a little bit like a Ferrari Formula One car, with actually no progress being made. Again, therefore, it brings you back to the point that all of the interests are still there. All of the, in their own way, magnificent but isolated initiatives are still there. There is also the government position is we've got to manage the figures. Now, if you're going to put all of those things together, somewhere there has to be a form of company, organisation, employer engagement that says, to manage the programmes and the initiatives, to manage the government's political drives, to manage the figures, to manage the demands of companies and organisations, have all somehow to be brought together. And having looked at everything else and having had some experience of everything else, it's almost a Sherlock Holmes thing, sort of say, well, they never quite worked, what are we left with? And we're left with the employer at the hub of this position. It is quite true that over the past years, employers have been incentivised, and when youth training schemes were on the go, they weren't incentivised, actually they were bribed. Government handed out money hand over fist to people like Boots and Marks and Spencers to say, if you will take on 10 young people, unqualified young people into work, here is some money if you'll take on 100, if you'll take on 1,000. I saw the money changing hands, and I was the note taker at one of the meetings where Marks and Spencers, of all people, signed up to this. When the money dried up, so did the kids. They were just pushed straight back out onto the street, and because they're on government schemes, did not even have to be given notice periods or severance or anything else, even if they'd been on the schemes for up to 2 years. Right. The morality, the invidiousness, and all of that, it was purely a commercial transaction. Here is some taxpayers' money, right, will you do it? Yes. And the minute the incentive dried up, the companies were off. Right. So, one of the things that has to be defined is the investment and the returns that are there. It's a completely legitimate demand to make on employers. It's a completely legitimate question for employers to ask, what is in this for us? And there is a substantial level of dialogue that has to go on around that in order to convince employers, companies and organisations, public sector bodies and universities just the same, that at all levels of the workforce, all levels of qualification, including no qualifications, there is a social, moral, as well as an economic imperative for taking people on. And some of that is about convincing top managers, and some of that is about defining this in terms that they understand, which is investment and return. Right. What I've said so far begins to refer to some of these. Certainly, organisational attitudes. We have what we've got. We have what we hold. And you can look at any newspaper, tabloid or broadsheet or website or anything else, and find that actually, that is not the case. That you're seeing companies and organisations stating about their employment practices things that are actually actually in total contrast to their performance. So, as I said just earlier, there is a deeper conversation that has to be had, but one that nevertheless has to be had anyway. During its boom years, which came, that came to an end last year, Tesco built its own empire on the increases in employment. They were convinced that every time they needed to do something to improve their position, they would take on staff. They were criticised by the stock market each time they produced reports, and they said, you know, your margin has gone up from 20 to 25% of the grocery market, or 25 to 30% of the grocery market. The stock market would always criticise them and say, oh yeah, but you took on 20,000 extra staff. Under the regime of the previous chief executive, a bloke called Terry Leahy, he said, yep, I'm quite happy to live with that. Look at the percentages, look at the margins, look at the profits, look at the standing in which we are held. He left the company last summer, and you can trace back the stagnation and the bad press and everything else of the decline almost to the day that he left, when they started to look at the employment levels and say, oh yeah, we can have some redundancies here, we can cut staffing. It reinforces the point that there is a deeper conversation to be had, but one that nevertheless has to start anyway. What this is about then is placing that kind of an attitude, strategic human resource management at the hub. It's an attitude, an approach that has to become fully institutionalised and fully engaged collectively and individually across companies and organisations and sectors. Only if you can do that are you actually going to get people thinking, yeah, taking on staff is in our economic as well as our social and moral interests. Only then are you going to get the full value out of programmes and initiatives, programmes like mine at the university, which cater for the highly qualified, the well qualified and the even better qualified, and they have excellent connections while they're with us. And it's hard enough for some of the students. Certainly they have to fill in sort of 10 or 20 applications in order to get an offer or two. Right? And that's not even beginning to tackle the majority of students, the majority of younger people who come out with either medium qualifications from school, average qualifications from school, or no qualifications from school. I produced a printed version of the paper and do a little bit around that, but again it reinforces the attitude that has to be changed if, as I say, it's bad enough for my students that are coming out from good university, from hopefully a good degree course with good grades. The attitude towards those who do not have those levels of qualification in some companies and organisations is not far short of, it's nothing to do with us. Right. What it involves then is, it involves young people of all ages, certainly young people of all qualifications, and to get the to make sure that people recognise that whatever your level of qualification, you have something to contribute if only you're given the opportunity. That is bringing together all of the various initiatives that exist in the world with, again, reinforcement of this position that ultimately the energy has got to come from companies and organisations. Right. There is, further to that, there is an additional question about which part of the cohorts you're actually looking at, and it is to get companies and organisations to recognise that it's the whole cohort that they are looking at. That different parts of the cohort have different capabilities, different qualities, different qualifications, different expertise to bring alongside the energy and the enthusiasm that actually most of them will demonstrate if they are given half an opportunity. Right. The other side of this is to recognise sort of briefly the levels of engagement that you can expect from, or certainly in our experience, we have experienced from the companies and organisations. It is hard work but at least it gives you a kind of a key to the door, or a toe in the door rather than a foot. Certainly there is some skunk working, by which I mean that you're getting people of great commitment but sometimes limited influence trying to do things on behalf of someone. At my university, we laboured for a long time to try and get the mix of the programme that we've got, and the fact that we had anything at all was pretty much down to the previous head of department, but two, who was totally committed to what we were doing, but could not get any profile for it. And you find that going on across companies and organisations. Certainly, I was at a student conference yesterday, and one of the people who was there was a graduate recruitment manager from Capgemini. He is a very, very charismatic and dynamic individual, and has got some kind of sort of energy going at that company. But over the whole company, they just sort of look and say, oh yeah, graduate recruitment scheme, yeah, it looks all right, and that's their attitude. And again, if you sort of say, well, what's their attitude to those that don't have qualifications? It's, what do you mean, those that don't have qualifications? It's almost as if they've never heard of them. And so that's that's what I mean by skunk working. Otherwise, you can look at levels of engagement. I referred to the Tesco's example earlier. That you can see sort of full engagement, but the engagement certainly that Tesco's used to demonstrate came from the chief executive and the most powerful individual within the organisation. Where does this bring, therefore, alongside strategic HR influence? You can put a kind of parallel case together. That you've got a range of things that, oh yeah, we do this, oh yeah, we do that, oh yeah, we do that. And then you look in, social responsibility statements in annual reports, and they say, yes, we have, we aim to be an employer of choice. And you just sort of think, yeah, but your attitude actually is that you're looking after your own narrow self-interest for today, and not even raising your eyes above the parapet, let alone to head level. So it brings us on then to the sort of, very briefly onto the foundations of effective engagement. The beginning of all of this is to open a dialogue that, above all, recognises the desired outcomes that we all have. To make that conversation go on for years. But gradually it gets shortened and shortened and shortened, and all that you can do is to try to convince people to do bits, to do a bit more, to do a bit more. You can only do that if you know the desired outcomes, you manage to clarify them with the companies and organisations with whom you're in dialogue. The second is to recognise the level of engagement. There's no use trying to persuade companies and organisations to become fully engaged if they're not. On the other hand, if you offer a kind of blandness to a company that would love to be fully engaged, then they're going to sort of think, well, there's less to this than meets the eye, we're wrong, the rest of the world is right, we're in a minority of one, and so they pull back. It is to make sure that any lever that you can find, however engaged or however distant the company or may be, that at least you use that to start the dialogue. Right. And then the final part of this is to recognise boldly and openly where the engagement is going to lead. Right. If you don't recognise what companies, organisations, individual initiatives, and above all the demands of the people are, you're never going to get any effective engagement. You're going to get, very often lovely dialogue. It's nice to meet you again. How are you doing? Oh yeah, times is hard. We'd love to help, but is to get beyond that and to make sure that any opportunity that you're given is given the best possible opportunity of success. And you can only do that if you recognise exactly where the different people are coming from.